All right, we're here to break down a critical operating system for leadership, specifically for the year 2026. Now, we're not looking at this as just another year. We're looking at it as a period that demands a very specific kind of performance. And the one variable that's going to define success? It's authenticity. But not authenticity as some soft value. We're talking about authenticity as a hard-edged tool for winning, through presence, clarity, and real leadership. So here's our agenda for this briefing. First, we'll set the stage with the 2026 performance variable. Then we'll get into a hard definition of what authenticity actually is. From there, we'll talk about leading through market pressure, the 3 principles that guide that leadership, the 3-4-3 operating system that puts it into daily practice, and finally, we'll cover how you move from just intending to do something to actually taking action.
Okay, let's get right into it. The first thing you have to understand is that the strategic environment of 2026, well, it isn't neutral. It's actively working against our default behaviors, and it demands a fundamentally different approach to how we lead and perform.
Now, what's really happening here is a convergence of these massive pressures. Rising costs mean every mistake is more expensive. The constant uncertainty makes buyers incredibly cautious. Then you've got this flood of AI-generated content creating so much noise that it just erodes trust. And what's the result of all that? Overwhelm. These conditions don't just change buying patterns, they change human behavior, making everyone more conservative and deeply risk-averse.
So this market reality brings us right to our core concept. We have to strip away all the common, feel-good definitions of authenticity. We need to establish a hard, operational definition. This isn't about buzzwords, It's about observable behavior.
So let's be crystal clear. Authenticity, in this context, is not about softness. It's not about your feelings or just the words you say. It is a performance variable. It is clarity when you're under pressure. It's the absolute consistency of your thinking, your decisions, and your actions, especially when things are tough. Fundamentally, it's all about your behavior. And this, right here, this is the standard we have to hold ourselves to. It's a non-negotiable bar. Your intentions, irrelevant. Your declarations, meaningless. If the principle doesn't show up as consistent, observable behavior, then for all practical purposes, it just doesn't exist.
This brings every leader to a strategic choice. You have to pick your hard. The hard, easy path? That's about discipline up front. You decide once on your operating principles and you execute consistently. Yeah, it's uncomfortable in the short term, but it builds real long-term momentum. The alternative is the easy, hard path, letting your emotions run the show, which leads to broken commitments and that slow, quiet drift into total failure.
Okay, so let's connect this back to leading through those market pressures we talked about. This is where the rubber meets the road, where our hard definition of authenticity gets applied in a really challenging environment. It's all about how you show up.
This is really the heart of leadership influence. Your message, everything you say, is filtered through your presence. If you're internally focused on your own outcome, if you're carrying need into a conversation, that leaks. It comes through in your tone, your pace, your energy. And that inauthentic presence silently destroys the very trust you're trying to build. For those of us who are fractional leaders, it is absolutely critical to be clear on what you're actually selling. You're not selling your time. You're not selling information or a playbook of tactics. You are selling transformation. And transformation, well, it's inherently difficult. It involves change and risk and a whole lot of uncertainty.
And because that transformation is so difficult, the market pressure in 2026 just amplifies these predictable, conservative human behaviors. Buyers will delay decisions because, well, waiting just feels safer. They'll default to conservative, familiar choices, even if they're not the best ones. And they'll chase these small, tactical fixes while completely ignoring the bigger, structural problems that are getting worse every single day.
So what does this environment demand from you, the leader? Your role is not to provide reassurance. It's not to provide comfort or more tactics. Your role is to lead other leaders through their own uncertainty. It's to hold clarity and conviction when they hesitate. You simply cannot lead someone through change if you yourself are not centered and completely detached from the outcome.
Now, this leadership posture, it isn't based on personality. It's based on a governing logic. So let's really examine the 3 core principles that enable this kind of authentic, authoritative action in any situation you face.
There are 3. First, truth over hope. This means you do not soften reality. You don't sell maybe.
A swift disqualification based on the truth, that's a win. Second, assessment before advancement. You are there to diagnose, not to convince. Your authority comes from choosing who you work with, not from being chosen by them. And third, detachment from outcome. You have to be willing to go for the no. Any need you have for that deal to close completely kills your ability to lead. And that detachment, that's what other people perceive as your confidence.
So these principles then translate into visible rules of engagement. Clarity is always more important than consensus. The speed of a decision is valued way more than comfort. Your systems, not your sentiment, dictate your process. Emotion, that's a signal to be noticed, but it's not an input for decision-making. And once a prospect is truly qualified, you stop asking for permission and you assume forward motion. This is how your leadership becomes observable.
Now, principles are the governing philosophy, but here's the thing. Principles alone don't win days. Behavior does. So let's move from the what to the how, the daily operating system you need to make this leadership posture a consistent practice. This is the 3-4-3 framework. It is brutally simple, and that's why it's so ruthlessly effective. It's made up of 3 non-negotiable conversations per day, guided by 4 key questions, leading to one of 3 possible outcomes. This is the actual mechanism that turns your philosophy into daily execution. So here's how it works in practice. Those 3 daily conversations create momentum, and momentum stabilizes emotion. Each one of those conversations is an assessment, and it's guided by 4 questions. What is the real problem here? What is its cost? What are the consequences if we do nothing? And what does the transformation actually look like? And every single one of these conversations ends with a clean decision and one of 3 outcomes: advance to the next step, nurture for a future time, or disqualify. Cleanly, no limbo, no maybes. This system removes need and it creates an undeniable sales rhythm. Okay, we've covered the why, the what, and the how. This final section is about ownership. The focus now shifts from just understanding these concepts to actually applying them, starting immediately.
You know, leadership isn't proven by insight. It's proven by action. The path to owning this is a clear 3-stage process. It starts with a clear intention. That intention gets solidified into a real commitment, and that commitment has to be immediately translated into a tangible action.
So I'll pose this question directly to you. What is the one behavior you will change today to show up more authentically? Not a big plan, not 3 things, one single, observable behavior. It might be disqualifying a prospect you've been dragging along for weeks, or maybe it's having a direct conversation you've been avoiding. Take a moment, define it right now.
And that brings us to the final thought. Big declarations won't define your success in 2026. This year is going to be won by the small, consistent acts of leadership repeated daily. It's won by winning today, which just makes winning tomorrow a little bit easier. You don't win the year with intention. You win it by winning enough days.